Thank you, Kareen, and good morning to everybody. It is my pleasure to be here at the 2022 Channel Innovation Awards. I always enjoy hearing the wonderful success stories. That success is a result of hard work and smart decisions by many, many people. So my best wishes to the winners, nominees, and attendees of today's event. The Canadian IT industry continued to see tremendous change in 2021. The past 2 years have been one massive social experiment. Working from home, online schooling, digital health services, we saw accelerated business transformation to meet the digital demands of customers, employees, and citizens. The Canadian channel was equally impacted by these changes. Some companies in the channel took advantage of the opportunities, while others struggled. As your company emerges from the pandemic, you may be feeling like you're getting back on track. There's a sense of optimism that we are finally getting back to normal. In the next 20 minutes or so, I will outline the winds of change and what you can do to navigate through them to address today's theme, finding the growth opportunities. First, I will talk about some of the tailwinds for IT spending growth, and also talk about a number of the headwinds you'll be sailing into and crosswinds that may knock your company off track. I will also talk about the technology markets that will see the fastest growth and how spending growth links to a number of key strategic imperatives that will shape digital businesses for the next decade. Then I will wrap up with a description of the channel partner of the future, a business model for you to consider to enable you to best prepare for finding the growth opportunities for the next decade. It feels like the global economy is getting back to normal. The Canadian economy performed well in 2021. By the end of the fourth quarter, the Canadian economy was finally bigger than it was before the pandemic. And the economic outlook in 2022 is very promising. However, organizations face potential disruptions that will affect IT spending growth. I'm going to walk you through each of these in more detail by using the analogy of a cyclist. Most of us have ridden a bicycle in our lives, and you can relate to riding on a flat road. When you start to ride uphill, you have to pedal harder and harder. Imagine riding a bicycle for 50 kilometers or longer. The impact of a tailwind or a headwind or a crosswind can make your ride much easier or much harder. Let's start with the tailwinds that will drive tech spending. One tailwind is digital-first consumers. During the pandemic, many consumers adopted new digital habits, such as 20% of Canadians using curbside pickup for the first time. These new digital-first behaviors drove companies to embrace digital transformation faster. The shift to digital transformation has been building over the past decade. However, many Canadian organizations have been slow to adopt it, and many experience roadblocks along the way. Commitment to digital was one of the most common obstacles by most organizations. At the beginning of the pandemic, only 32% of Canadian CEOs felt pressure to really embrace digital and complete a digital strategy in 3 years. The pandemic demolished that sentiment. An IDC survey in January 2022 found that 69% of CEOs in Canada say the pandemic forced their organizations to adopt a digital-first strategy. This is why we are seeing more spending on digital commerce applications, collaboration software, security, and other technologies. So it is no surprise that 92% of Canadian CEOs plan to maintain or increase technology spending in 2022. Another tailwind for the technology market is the impact of government spending. The different levels of government represent 14% of technology spending in Canada. And when you add in education and healthcare providers, the public sector represents 24% of market spending. Beyond what these organizations spend themselves, their policies also drive spending. For example, the federal budget in 2021 committed $350 million in spending to support the development of a national strategy for quantum computing. And another policy change we saw during the pandemic was to support virtual healthcare. When the Ontario government changed its billing policies for healthcare, we saw a huge jump in virtual care visits, which indirectly led many healthcare providers to invest in supporting technologies. There are some headwinds that will slow down spending, which will make finding growth opportunities more challenging. While many organizations made tech investments in the past 2 years to address the unique needs of the pandemic, those investments did not end in 2021. According to an IDC Canada survey during the pandemic, roughly 60% of tech budgeting spending was going towards day-to-day business operations. And I'd expect that to increase in 2022 as COVID-related investments become part of our daily operations. This is because many organizations are still dealing with technical debt. And technical debt has increased over the pandemic because the technologies that we invested in were not integrated with our legacy technology. You're also dealing with the lack of skills. While this is not a new problem, we expect this to become a bigger problem for more companies because more organizations are pursuing digital transformation. The lack of skills is consistently one of the top headwinds we see companies face in areas like security, cloud, and analytics. Companies struggle to find the skills they need and to keep the ones they have, and we all face this. But we believe that it's getting worse for organizations in Canada. And as the chart on the right-hand side indicates, twice as many firms now find difficulty in sourcing skilled workers as compared to before the pandemic. The problem with the shortage is that it has real business impacts. According to an IDC study, DX projects have been delayed by as much as 35 weeks on average due to staffing shortages. So those companies that are late to DX are falling even further behind. And finally, IDC is seeing rising tensions between nations globally, which will slow technology spending as supply chains and international operations are affected. This has become more acute with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and IDC is revising our global forecasts in response. So we've looked at some tailwinds and we've looked at some headwinds. Let's now look at crosswinds. The crosswinds are problematic because they have the potential to knock you off course and allow your competition to move ahead. One of the crosswinds we see is changing societal norms. We see consumers and businesses more interested in organizations who can balance making a profit with having a purpose. We are seeing more IT contracts include clauses like ethical sourcing, accessibility, and diversity and inclusion. You may be wondering if this applies to Canada and does it affect my business? It may be more common in other countries, but we are already seeing leading companies adding some T's and C's in these areas into IT contracts. And governments are introducing policies to provide opportunities to suppliers owned by Indigenous peoples, women, and minorities. So you can expect this crosswind to affect your business in the near future. Related to changing societal norms is a greater focus on sustainability. We are seeing sustainability objectives factor into IT investments more and more. For example, many customers are looking for service providers that use renewable energy to power their data centers. One of the crosswinds that we think will have a dramatic impact on the Canadian channel is the level of merger and acquisition activity we've seen in recent years. And there are always M&As in the IT industry, but we have seen a significant spike in the past few years as vendors meet changing requirements due to digital transformation. We are seeing three general trends. First is smaller specialized firms merging to scale up. And examples of this are companies like Carbon60 acquiring GTNet and Cirrus9, as well as OpsGuru to enhance its cloud professional services. And Arctic merging with Benchmark to scale up and deliver end-to-end cloud solutions. We're also seeing publicly traded companies take a consolidation strategy and acquiring independents. Examples like this are Converged Technology Solutions acquiring companies like Northern Micro and PCD Solutions and others throughout North America. And finally, we're seeing services firms acquiring companies to expand their capabilities. And the major accounting firms are especially active in this area. We looked at the mergers and acquisition activity for some of the leading accounting firms in Canada over the past few years, and we've illustrated their activity on the chart on the right-hand side. And you can see the spike in 2021. Now, while last year might be a bit of an outlier, we do expect them to continue to acquire smaller firms. So where will you see growth in 2022? IDC's latest forecast is that Canada will see IT spending growth by 2% in 2022 after a stronger than expected 2021, where IT spending grew 4%. However, that growth will not be in all technology segments or customer segments. As you try to find the growth opportunities, keep in mind that hardware-related markets have a mixed outlook for 2022 after coming off a strong 2021. And software will see modest growth, and IT services will return to pre-pandemic growth rates. One thing to keep in mind is the customer segments. Some of the strong hardware market growth we saw in 2021 was a result of spending by consumers on PCs, mobile phones, and peripherals. Consumer IT spending accounted for 22% of total IT spending in 2021, and consumer spending grew twice as fast as the overall market. In 2022, we expect consumer spending to be flat at best, which is a headwind for the hardware markets. Technology markets driven by business spending will see growth. Cloud will see strong growth as indicated by infrastructure as service on the chart. SaaS and PaaS will also see strong growth, and they are driving the growth in software. And we expect IT spending growth by in the major industries that we track in the range of 3 to 5% in 2022. So you will be able to find growth opportunities, but you'll have to take share against your competitors as well as ride the tide of overall spending growth if you want to see substantial revenue growth. I'd like to turn to how to find the growth opportunities. Certainly good execution and business management will factor in, but I also wanted you to think about addressing the changing needs of enterprises that IDC's research says will be shaping business priorities over the next decade. IDC has been studying digital transformation and the underlying technologies for years. In 2019, we looked ahead and we analyzed what are the key elements that will define organizations in the future based on technology, consumer expectations, society needs, and government regulations. We created the Future of Enterprise conceptual framework that you see here. There are 9 Future of Enterprise agenda items that we believe all organizations will act on in the next decade. The global nature and severity of COVID put the new agenda to the test, but we see that it correlated very well to the success that many companies had during the pandemic. No company is doing everything well, but some are thriving because they are doing enough of these imperatives well enough. Each of these agenda items will involve a mix of technologies and services that will combine to address use cases that align to the overarching business priority. So for example, the future of trust is about addressing the business imperative to build trust with customers and stakeholders. This will lead to spending on cybersecurity as well as privacy and compliance solutions to meet corporate and social responsibility. The future of trust is not only about protecting the assets and keeping the bad actors out, it's also about mitigating enterprise risk. This is one of the reasons we see accounting firms buying IT security firms so that they can help their clients manage enterprise risk better. I mentioned that we believe all organizations will address the future enterprise agendas over the next decade as they become digital-first businesses. According to our research, several of them are top priorities today. I'm showing the results of our latest Canadian Top Exec survey when we asked Canada's largest organizations what their business priorities are in the context of our framework. Not surprisingly, the future of trust is at the top of the list. Security and privacy are top of mind for companies. Trust takes a long time to build and can be lost very quickly in the digital world. It is easy for customers to switch to another supplier. One thing we saw during COVID was the importance of companies to have digital resiliency. This meant that companies had to ensure their back-end data was properly integrated with their digital front ends and that infrastructure was highly available. This led many companies to increase their use of cloud platforms and invest in intelligent automation to minimize manual work. Another thing we saw was the rethinking around engaging in industry ecosystems. One industry that saw a big change here was restaurants, when many started using industry ecosystems like Skip the Dishes. In 2020, Skip the Dishes added 16,000 restaurants to its platform in Canada, an increase of 69%. Skip the Dishes and other similar apps made it possible for many independent restaurants to provide a digital experience and continue to operate during the pandemic when everything was shut down. So as you try to find the growth opportunities in 2022, look for areas that map to digital resiliency and support greater trust, more intelligent organizations, and enhanced digital infrastructure. So let's recap. The Canadian IT market is seeing tailwinds and headwinds change in direction of spending growth. And there are changes in buyer behavior and actions by competitors that will throw you off course. We are seeing spending growth in software and services, while hardware spending has a mixed outlook in 2022. To grow faster than the market, you'll need to focus on high growth areas or take share in traditional markets. And we believe you can position your company for success in 2022 and beyond by aligning to the future enterprise framework that IDC predicts will shape the business priorities of companies over the next decade as they digitally transform. Now let's talk about what you can do to thrive in this environment. IDC believes the future enterprises will require a new type of technology supplier, one that is innovative and helps their clients become more innovative. A supplier that is a critical thinker and scrutinizes how to apply technologies to use cases to enhance business processes. A trusted advisor to the client's entire business and its stakeholders. And a supplier that acts as the gateway to technology ecosystems that are needed in the digital economy. In conclusion, we think if you target the high growth areas, align to your client's future enterprise needs, and become the partner of the future, you will find the growth opportunities in the Canadian market in 2022 and beyond. Thank you very much, and best wishes to today's winners and nominees.